Extreme heat has made headlines the last few weeks, most notably the devastating heat wave that hit much of North America. And while this heat wave was in many ways absolutely exceptional, it is worth noting that a big part of why it made headlines was because it was in North America. Heat waves around the globe are becoming distressingly more commonplace. But heat is far more than just headlines. So in this video, I want to talk about what makes heat so dangerous, how climate change is affecting that heat, and what we can do about it. Now, full disclaimer, the contents of this video may be somewhat distressing, and so I completely understand if you want to skip to the end to that solutions bit, or you just want to skip this video entirely. I promise I won't be offended. The first thing that you need to know about heat waves is that climate change is affecting them a lot. And this makes sense, right? If we heat up the planet, then you'd expect extreme heat to become even more extreme and more commonplace. What you might not expect is just how supersized the effects of climate change can be on heat waves. Let's just take this North American heat wave as an example. Estimates suggest that it was made about 150 times more likely by climate change, as well as around 2 degrees hotter than it otherwise would have been. And when it comes to something like extreme heat, every fraction of a degree matters for the human impacts. Now, climate change can and does affect all sorts of other extreme weather events too, but climate change's effect on heat waves are somewhat unique in that pretty much every heat wave is affected to some degree by climate change, and climate change can have these incredibly supersized effects, sometimes making heat waves hundreds, even thousands of times more likely. Now, the second thing you need to know about extreme heat is that it kills. Now, it's perhaps obvious how storms or floods end lives, but perhaps less obvious for a heat wave, especially when often when we talk about heat waves, we represent it with pictures of people playing in fountains. Now, there are two main general ways that heat waves can kill you. The first is through dehydration, as the body sweats to try and keep itself cool. And the second is through inflammation, as blood vessels around the body dilate. There are a number of more specific ways that heat waves can cause death, and actually while researching this video I came across a study called 27 Ways a Heat Wave Can Kill You. That's linked to in the description of this video if you want a particularly depressing read. In America, extreme heat is now responsible for more deaths than hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods. And globally, climate change is responsible for 1 in 3 heat-related deaths. I mentioned this in my last video, but it's a statistic that is so shocking that it bears repeating. For risk from heat, what's important is both the heat itself and how long you're exposed to it. People who are particularly frail are particularly at risk. That means elderly people and people with certain disabilities. Then there are the people who can't easily escape the heat because they don't have adequate housing or don't have any housing at all, or perhaps they don't have any means to stay hydrated. All of this is a long way of saying that heat kills the most vulnerable among us. But is it always the vulnerable who succumb to extreme heat? Is there a limit to what the human body can, in theory, handle? Well, it turns out there is, and this limit depends not just on temperature, but also on humidity. That's because we keep our bodies cool by sweating, and this works less efficiently the more humid things are. You can evaluate this combination of heat and humidity using what's called a wet bulb temperature. This is measured using a regular thermometer but covered in a wet cloth. The water from the cloth can evaporate, cooling the thermometer, and this kind of mimics how the body keeps itself cool using sweat. And at a wet bulb temperature of 35 degrees Celsius or higher, the human body's metabolism simply cannot cope. And when I say this, I mean that for any human body, even a fit, healthy person sitting in the shade with unlimited access to hydration. Now, on planet Earth, most places that are extremely hot are not extremely humid, and vice versa, most places which are extremely humid are not extremely hot. That means that pretty much nowhere has ever come close to this 35 degrees Celsius limit, although a recent study did point out that 2 places may have passed it very briefly. But as I've mentioned before, the more we emit, the hotter the planet gets. That means we'll continue to see higher and higher wet bulb temperatures, and more lives will be put at risk. Now, even under some of the worst case emissions scenarios, even by the end of the 21st century, it's very unlikely that any parts of the world would regularly see wet bulb temperatures higher than this crucial 35 degrees Celsius. But if we look out into the more distant future and imagine the worst case scenario, where we burn all the fossil fuels available to us, then it's possible that temperatures could become so extreme that places where half the world's population currently live would regularly see wet bulb temperatures above this unlivable limit. Now, this is super unlikely. This means us continuing to do nothing about climate change for hundreds of years. But still, it's worth bearing in mind just how extreme what we're doing to our planet could become. So what can we actually do about it? Well, as with any climate change related disaster, there are 2 sides to the solution coin: mitigate and adapt. Mitigate means stopping climate change as quickly as we possibly can. After all, we've already seen just over 1 degree Celsius of global warming, but even at these levels of warming, many heat waves are already hundreds of times more likely because of our actions. By the end of the century, if we don't mitigate, what's considered extreme today could be relatively commonplace, and I do not want to know what is considered extreme then. But we also need to help people survive the extreme heat we already have today, and that we're going to have tomorrow. That means providing vulnerable people with shelter, air conditioning, and supplies in order to stay hydrated. It means checking up on people in our local communities. And it means accepting that some parts of the world may become unlivably hot in the future. That means refugees might not just come from flooding or from rising seas. They may also come from extreme heat. What the last few weeks remind us, though, is that the threat of extreme heat is only going to loom larger the more we emit. After all, climate change's impact on heat waves is huge, and heat waves' impact on our lives is even bigger. Thanks a lot for making it all the way to the end of this somewhat depressing video. On a lighter note, I've got a collaboration coming up with one of my all-time favorite climate change YouTubers, all about a famous climate change solution: hydrogen. You're going to want to see that one, so make sure you're subscribed, you hit the notification bell, and I'll see you next time. Okay, until then, bye.